What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Nick and Bush coming at you with DFS content for week 3. We're going through our favorite FanDuel picks, our favorite DraftKings picks, our locks of the week, our stacks of the week, all that kind of stuff, all that fun stuff that we go through every week. As always, anything that comes out of my mouth in terms of a price will be FanDuel related. Anything that comes out of Nick's mouth in terms of a price will be DraftKings related. Nick, how you doing?
Doing good. Yeah, happy to be back. Last week was a little bit weird, just in general, not being able to make the show. A lot of my work schedule got really insane. But honestly, it was probably for the best. Like, I had a great week 1. Week 2 was really not that good for me. So you probably just didn't need my picks last week, and everybody was just fine. Happy to be moving into week 3.
Yeah, I mean, they probably didn't need my picks either, considering how I did. I did
Yeah.
not do great I mean, like all the chalky picks that I thought were very good picks, like Derrick Henry and stuff, like none of them just hit. So
Yeah, that was me too. I mean, Derrick Henry, fell on his face. The one tournament lineup that I had that did well, I ran a Tannehill Jonnu stack that worked out nicely just to kind of pivot off of Derrick Henry. But basically everything else I did flopped on its face. So
yeah, makes
it
sense.
happens.
All right, so we're gonna hit the intro and then we're gonna get right into it. All right, so we're gonna start off with kind of like we did this last week, Nick, when you weren't here, and I think this is kind of a good way to start it. Is you talk about some of the big decisions that you're gonna have to face each week as a DFS player. If you want to go into some of yours, and then I'll get into some of mine that I've found are going to be bigger ones.
Yeah, so I think just to kind of single in on, I think the biggest decision of the week is going to be that mid-range wide receiver tier. Kind of going over like the Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Amari Cooper. They're all, DK and Amari are 6,500, Tyler Lockett 6,400. That game we all want pieces of, and specifically in cash games, like in tournaments, you could play all three. But I think in cash games, one of the biggest decisions is picking the right one of those guys to play. Because, I mean, maybe you pick one Seattle wide receiver and Amari in cash, but odds are you're probably only picking one of those guys in cash games. And yeah, I think that's going to be a huge decision point of like which one of those guys you're going to play. I'll start there.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll start with my kind of to play or not to play according to PFF. FanDuel expects the highest ownership percentages to be as follows. This will be on the screen right now. Zeke Elliott, DeAndre Hopkins, Miles Sanders, Derrick Henry, Kenyon Drake, Jonathan Taylor, Tyler Lockett, and Kyler Murray. A lot of those guys I'm going to be eating the chalk and playing anyway. But there's certain guys that I'll get into later that there's guys around them in their price range that I actually like better and I think have similar upside that I will be fading in tournaments and even cash games for to get an edge in case some of those guys bust.
Yeah, I think the general build with in cash games with running backs this week, I think another decision point is, are you going to go with kind of the like mid-tier priced-ish guys with like Miles Sanders, Jonathan Taylor, Jerick McKinnon, like that's kind of like the
I think
cheaper
the Niners
build.
backfield is a decision in itself too, because I know a lot of
Oh,
people are
100%.
on McKinnon, a lot of people are on Jeff Wilson. My
Yeah.
opinion is I'm staying away from the backfield altogether because I'll get into it later, but I actually like some guys in the price range of those guys better.
Yeah, I think if you're going to play Zeke in cash games, I think the smart build is to play, actually, at least on DraftKings, is to play probably Jerick McKinnon. That's who I would go with, in my opinion. But I think I'm honestly kind of getting away from that whole build, and I think I'm just going to run 3 mid-tier guys. Like I like Kenyon Drake, I like Miles Sanders, and I like Jonathan Taylor in cash on DraftKings. Those are my, I think, cash running backs as of right now. I mean, that could change, but that's the build I'm liking. The wide receivers this week under 5K on DraftKings are shit. Last week, there
They're
was
not
actually
good.
some
The
pretty
the low
good.
priced ones on FanDuel aren't good either.
Yeah, it's just last week there was some pretty decent values under 5K, like guys you could project to actually get a decent target share and were good values. This week it's atrocious. Like in cash games, the cheapest wide receiver I'm looking at is 5,400. We'll get into him a little later. But yeah, because of that, I'm liking the mid-level kind of balanced approach all the way across.
Mhm.
Cheaper at tight end, cheaper at defense. Yeah, that's the build I'm liking.
Yeah, me and you are on definitely the same page here with most of my lineups that I've built so far on FanDuel. I'm not sure how much it differs on DraftKings, but because I haven't built any lineups there yet. But the mid tier across the board seems to be the play this week. So let's get in position by position. Let's get into the quarterbacks. And so you've already heard our kind of strategy. We're going to be favoring the mid tier across the board. In terms of the top tier quarterbacks, I think it's pretty obvious to me in my weekly rankings for like redraft purposes. I have Russell Wilson and Dak Prescott as my top two quarterbacks on the week, with Lamar Jackson at 3, and then I have like the highest over under on the slate is the Seahawks and Cowboys game. So I think the two quarterbacks should be. I mean, if you're willing to spend up at quarterback and you have the money to spare, which I think you can if you're going mid tier at receiver and some of the other positions. I think you can afford to get some of these guys into your lineup if you want to spend up for them. And I think due to the high volume of scoring in this game, like I think both of these guys are going to be very, very safe.
Yeah, they're super safe. I don't know if on DraftKings the optimal build is to fit one of them in on in cash games.
You can
I'm
do
trying
it on
to kind of
FanDuel from what I've seen.
yeah,
So
for
far.
sure. Typically on FanDuel, it's no problem to be. Plus, paying up at quarterback on FanDuel is just much more optimal than it is on DraftKings. The way the prices are like, I mean, Derek Carr on DraftKings is 5,400 as to where Russell Wilson's 7,200. So that's like a 2K difference, which is huge with DraftKings $50,000 salary cap. Not saying that you necessarily want to play Derek Carr in cash games, but like Nick Mullins is 5,100. It's just, anyways, my top tier guy is also Russell Wilson for all the reasons you said. I mean, the over under is 56.5. That's freaking massive. The Cowboys passing defense has not been great. They're letting Russ cook this year. It's really just a beautiful game.
Yeah, and not on top of that too, the Cowboys defense is already banged up this year with Chidobe Awuzie's questionable coming into this game. I believe so is Trayvon Diggs. They're both at risk of missing this game on top of the losses they've already had with the two linebackers that they lost and Anthony Brown, I believe, or something they also lost as well. So I lean Russ of the two guys. If you're going to pay up for one of the quarterbacks, I do lean Russ as well. Yeah, into the mid-tier guys, and these are my two guys this week. All my lineups that I've built thus far have one of these two guys in them, and that's Big Ben at 7,500 on FanDuel and Ryan Tannehill at 7,400 on FanDuel. Big Ben's the guy I'm leaning towards in most cases because he has the 15th highest projected ownership, where Tannehill is a little bit higher than that. I think in GPP and cash, he presents a high ceiling against the Texans, who are third worst in the NFL according to PFF of total defense, and among the league worst in coverage as well. I think depending on if Juju plays, and according to Juju's Instagram, he said he's going to play in this game. He's like, fantasy owners fire me up. He put that out on his Instagram or something. So if he plays, I think Ben is in for a pretty large day from a passing perspective.
Yeah, I like Ben this week. He sounds a little bit more of a better play on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings price-wise. My mid-tier on DraftKings is actually Matthew Stafford. He's going against the Arizona Cardinals at 6,300, and the Lions have started out 0-2. They should have beat the Bears for sure. Like, they should be 1-1. DeAndre Swift should have caught that ball, walked into the end zone, and they should be 1-1. But 0-2 is not where the Lions expected to be, and the Cardinals are 2-0. So if nothing else, even if the Lions win this game, I expect them to do everything they can to try and win. So I like Matthew Stafford. I like that Kenny Golladay is probable to return. It's not a guarantee, but it's probable, which I think opens the field for Marvin Jones. It opens the field for TJ Hawkinson. In general, Matthew Stafford, I think, is just a good, safe play. He's going to pass a lot. And I think there is a lot of upside. Arizona's defense has definitely been better than last year, but they still play fast, and that means kind of more plays. And, if the Detroit Lions defense keeps being as terrible as they are, it means the Lions should get the ball more, which means more yards and more potential for scoring. I like Stafford this week.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there with the fact that the Lions and the Cardinals game is going to be a high-paced game. I think there's going to be a lot of plays run in that game. Yeah, I think both the quarterbacks in this slate or in that game are going to be highly owned. My trepidation with Kyler Murray and why I'm not playing him this week is because I think it's a Kenyon Drake game because the Lions have been terrible against the run. So that's why I'm kind of leaning against Kyler Murray. If you were looking to pay up for someone, I don't think it would be Kyler for me. I mentioned Tannehill already. I think the reason I like Tannehill this week is because the Vikings are down two corners, Hughes and Dantzler, and they were already the second worst secondary in the league according to PFF. So, I mean, AJ Brown was ruled out in this game. I don't care because Tannehill put up 4 touchdowns without him last week, and I think he's going to have another field day this week.
Yeah, I don't mind Tannehill. I actually was, I want to say he's barely cheap on DraftKings. I think it's 5,700 or 5,900, whatever it is. It's a good price. There's like this small part of me that because I made money using him last week, I'm like, oh, do I want to go back to the Tannehill well and hope that it works out
He's
again?
been good,
But that's
man.
just
Like
like,
over the
no, it's
past
just
like
dumb bias. Oh,
10
I know.
games, like he's been consistent. He hasn't had a lot of like really bad games. Like he's just been
I know
efficient.
that. Yeah, I know that. It's just he hasn't really looked that good this year. Like he played good last week, but like week one, he looked terrible. Like it looked like the old Tannehill. I don't know. We'll see. I like the call. I'll probably have a little bit of Tannehill because I like the cost, but yeah. So going into my values, I kind of mentioned him earlier. It's Derek Carr as my main value at 5,400. I don't necessarily love the matchup, but 5,400 is cheap. Darren Waller is looking like he's probable to play, which I like. Darren Waller is just obviously the alpha with the Raiders. And in general, if you're going to pay up for tight end, I think he's a good choice this week. Carr's projected ownership via Roto-Grinders is less than 1%. And I think there's a better than 1% chance that he hits the ceiling. So if you just kind of do the numbers, even if you just sprinkle some in tournaments, he is not a cash game quarterback this week. But if you sprinkle him in a little bit in tournaments to kind of get up there to the Nukes, to the, the Zekes, the whatever you want to pay up for, I don't mind it. Someone else that's cheap, the honorable mention, is Nick Mullins going against the New York Giants. Nick Mullins flashed some ceiling last year. He had a couple of 30-point games. He's 5,100. And I think that he could have like a Fitzmagic bomb 5,100 30-point game against the Giants. Like I can see it happening, and that's my other honorable mention.
Yep. And my two values, I think, as we mentioned with the mid-tier kind of strategy across the board, these guys I'm only playing in tournaments to kind of differentiate myself. But Daniel Jones at 6,900 on FanDuel, who's the 21st projected ownership quarterback according to PFF, and Baker Mayfield at 7,100 is the 18th projected ownership quarterback according to PFF. I think probably GPP only for both of these guys because we've seen their floors. Like Daniel Jones was horrible last week. Baker Mayfield was horrible 2 weeks ago. Like their floors are pretty low. But the Washington defense in the case of Baker Mayfield is a pass funnel defense. I think Hunt and Chubb will struggle on the ground. PFF, and here's the thing with Washington. Washington has a great front, right? We've talked about it before. But PFF actually has the Browns with the third highest protection grade on the season. They've apparently made huge strides with the additions that they've made with Conklin and Jedrick Wills on the offensive line, and their interior has been lights out. I believe Wyatt Teller's like the second highest graded guard on PFF or something. So the Washington front, as I mentioned, will probably have a tougher time against them than they would against like the spongy ass Eagles line that they went up against in week one and the Cardinals line last week. So I think Baker's probably going to be able to find Odell and those guys down the field this week. And then Daniel Jones enters a matchup that, I mean, against the Niners was a lot scarier 2 weeks ago, but they lost like Bosa, Solomon Thomas, D Ford's out for this game. Richard Sherman's out. Like their defense doesn't scare me at all in this game. And I think the weapons that they do have, Ingram and Slayton and Golden Tate, match up well with what the Niners' weaknesses are on defense right now.
Yeah, I think it was a good call. 6,900 for Daniel Jones, a good price. I like those.
Yeah, in my one tournament lineup, I have the stack of Slayton and Daniel Jones and Evan Ingram. So hopefully that works out for me.
Nice.
Yeah, on to the running backs. But before we get into them, just as always, guys, if you've enjoyed thus far, hit the button that looks like this. Comment any of your thoughts down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Hit the bell icon so that you're notified anytime we post any videos. And also make sure that you are following along before our live streams and all that kind of stuff as well. All right, so into the running backs. At the top, we have, I think, a pretty obvious play for the top-tier running backs in Zeke Elliott at 9,000 on FanDuel. And I don't mind Dalvin Cook at 8,600. I think it's pretty chalky for Zeke, as I mentioned, but if you're paying up, I do think he is the best option. Dalvin, to me, is more so to differentiate yourself because I think he's going to have a lower ownership than a lot of people expect because of the guys going around him as well as the mid-tier, as we talked about. I could see him just having a much better game against the Titans run defense that has honestly just been not good without Jarrell Casey this year. They've really struggled from that perspective. So I think Cook will probably get on track to his normal kind of standards this week.
Yeah, I mean, Zeke was my pick as well for the top tier. He's 8,300 on DraftKings. With CMC and Saquon both being out, I mean, Zeke is just the big staple that's left. He cannot be phased out. He's catching more balls than he ever has before. The total is massive. If there's going to be touchdowns, Zeke's going to score some. He's just a great play. The good pivot, like you said, I think even on DraftKings as well, is Dalvin Cook. He's 7,600. The Minnesota Titans game is actually, the total is really high. I think they're up at 54 at this point. So it's a lot higher than people are realizing. I think it's actually got some sneaky shootout appeal, as well as the Detroit Arizona game. That total's 55. So it's only a point and a half lower than the Dallas Seattle game. I don't know if people
there's going to be some scoring this week. I think this is a great week for DFS, like in terms of just
for sure
plays across the board and scoring in general. I think this is a great week for it. So
so that's my top tier.
Yeah, on to the mid tier, which I think is probably the guts of the running back position this week. You mentioned two of the guys already, Sanders at 7,400 on FanDuel and Kenyon Drake at 6,500 on FanDuel, which is probably the best value on the entire slate, in my opinion. And then I also like Austin Eckler at 7,500. And I also don't mind Leonard Fournette for tournament purposes this week. These are the money plays. The first three guys I mentioned. That I have a cash lineup with all three guys in it, with Eckler, Sanders, and Drake as my one of them's in my flex spot. But like those are the money plays in my opinion. They probably go against the three worst run defenses in the league, with Eckler going up against Carolina, Sanders going up against Cincinnati, and Kenyon Drake going up against Detroit. So they're likely going to be highly owned. Sanders and Drake specifically, I think, but they're in too good of spots to fade in cash, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I love all three of those plays. The only one at this point I'm switching out on DraftKings in my cash lineup is Eckler. I'm more looking at Jonathan Taylor. He's 7,000, and Jonathan Taylor's just a beast. He's fitting well into my lineup. Miles Sanders on DraftKings is the biggest value play of them all. Miles Sanders is 6,400. That is insane for 23 touches, 7 targets, 4 red zone attempts. Last week, he balled out. He did what we all knew he would, and he's facing the Bengals, so I just see more of it. Kenyon Drake sitting in the flex for that late hammer against the Lions. He's 6K on DraftKings, 6,000 for Kenyon Drake against the Lions. I agree with you. I think it's a Kenyon Drake week. I love those three running backs. That's where I'm going.
Yeah, and as I mentioned with Fournette, I think he is a decent tournament play. He's risky, obviously. If don't do it if you're not feeling risky, because I think due to potential game script in this game, Bruce indicated that he's closer to the closer type running back for this team, where he's gonna if we're up in the second half, which I believe we will be, the Tampa Bay Bucks against the Broncos with Jeff Driscoll as their quarterback. I think Fournette's going to get a lot of carries in the second half, and then potential for more if Ronald Jones decides to goof and fumble again.
Yeah, I don't mind that call at all.
Yeah. All right. So into the value tier of running backs, and it's to me, it's a little bit of an empty meal at the value tier of running backs this week. I think it's a lot of people are like, oh man, look at the value at running back this week. I'm not really one of those people. I'm kind of staying away from this tier of running backs because I think there's a lot of traps in here. But a couple guys I do like. I like Antonio Gibson at 5,500, and I like Devin Singletary at 5,900 on FanDuel. And then DeAndre Swift is an absolute GPP dart throw. Do not play him unless you're feeling risky, obviously. For cash, I like Singletary and Gibson, as I mentioned, due to projected volume of their offense that they're going to see. Gibson playing the primary role, as we saw last week, is huge for him going forward. And the Browns defense is one that's been susceptible to big plays. And then Singletary with Moss ruled out for this game should be pretty highly owned, but I think the volume might be too good to pass up at 5,900. And we've seen him get plenty of carries when he's alone in the backfield, dating back to last year when Frank Gore was there. And then lastly on Swift, I think he's still running a lot of routes. And as we mentioned, this game is supposed to be high scoring, a lot of pace in this game. I think Swift can catch a lot of balls, and maybe he gets a goal line touch or a receiving touchdown or something like that.
Yeah, those are good calls. Last week we had Jonathan Taylor at 5,700. That was a smash play. This week there isn't really guys like that at the lower tiers. On DraftKings, Jerick McKinnon is 4,900 and Jeff Wilson is 4K. I think those are the only guys I can really feel comfortable with on DraftKings in the value department. Like I said, I don't see myself going there because they're just such locked-in touches. That's 6,400, 7K range with those running backs we just talked about. But yeah, those are the guys I would mention for value.
Yeah. Plus with the Niners running backs, I honestly think they're going to eat into each other. I don't think one of them is going to be a locked and loaded starter. I could be wrong about that, but I'd rather just pay up a little bit more for Gibson as opposed to playing someone like Jerick McKinnon, especially on FanDuel, where I think the difference is only $100 on FanDuel from McKinnon to Gibson. Yeah. So I'd rather just play Gibson instead of McKinnon. Into the wide receivers, I think the top is pretty obvious in my opinion. It looks like Julio Jones is going to be a game time decision. So to me, that puts Calvin Ridley at 8,000 on FanDuel as one of the best plays on the week. probably one of the most chalky plays, especially if Julio does miss. And then DeAndre Hopkins at 8,500, I think, is in a smash spot as well. But as I mentioned before, I'm kind of shying away from this top tier. One, because I think it could be a Kenyon Drake week, and maybe Hopkins gets a lot of targets and stuff, but he probably won't. Like, I just feel like he won't get into the end zone. And then Ridley, I just think is going to be crazy highly owned. So I don't know if I want to play him.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of talking about DeAndre Hopkins on DraftKings. If I'm going into the top tier right now, I'm looking at DeAndre Hopkins. He's 7,900. He is projected to be the highest owned wide receiver by
He appeals to me more on
at this
DK
point.
too because of the PPR.
Yeah. So, I mean, but a lot of people are thinking that way. Like I said, he's the highest owned projected wide receiver on DraftKings by Roto Grinders. Detroit's defense is just really bad, and if Kenyon Drake has a big week, DeAndre Hopkins still could. Kyler Murray's so good. He's looking incredible. I just like DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah. And as we mentioned with the running backs, the mid-tier is where I'm going to be living with the wide receivers. These three guys are in most of my lineups too, and that's Cooper Kupp at 7,100, Keenan Allen at 7,100, and Juju Smith-Schuster at 7,000. All of these guys have excellent matchups, with Kupp getting the luxury of Tre'Davious White shadowing Robert Woods. Keenan Allen looking revitalized, to be honest, with Justin Herbert going up against rookie Jeremy Chin in the slot. And then Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be having Bradley Roby shadow Deontay Johnson, a corner who actually did very well against Tyreek Hill and Marquise Brown the last 2 weeks. So I think Roby, we might need to take a little bit more seriously, and him being on Johnson, I think downgrades him quite a bit and makes Juju that much more appealing for me.
Yeah, I actually haven't really thought much about those three, so I'm going to have to look a little bit deeper. I do actually like your take on those. I'll have to check the prices deeper on DraftKings. My middle tier, I kind of mentioned them earlier. It's the big decision point. It's kind of deciding between Tyler Lockett, who's 6,400, Amari, who's 6,500, and DK, who's 6,500. They're all obviously in the same game. So if you're in a tournament, you're using Russ or Dak as the quarterback, and you want to stack them all up, so you'd want Russ as the quarterback in that situation, okay. But I think a lot of people are going to do that. So Roto Grinders has these three guys in the top 5 projected ownership percentage with wide receivers. They're all going to be heavily owned, and for good reason. The total's high. This game has a high likelihood to shoot out, and the quarterbacks are just good in this game in general. So we always like the pieces. Amari Cooper, for me, is going to be – I don't think I'm going to have a GPP lineup without him this week. Something about my gut is just telling me that I think he's going to blow up this week. I don't feel as comfortable in cash. I'm leaning more towards Tyler Lockett in cash at 6,400. That's who's in my lineup right now. But in tournament lineups, I'm just pushing the chips in on Amari Cooper. I believe that for some reason, I just feel like he's going to blow up this huge total. I think Dak and Amari really find their groove here, and Amari has a huge freaking game.
Yeah, and on that subject, Amari Cooper is that type of guy that can win you. Like, Amari Cooper has won me so much DFS money in the past couple of years because the reason is because typically you know when to start Amari Cooper in DFS is because if he's in a good matchup, he just goes absolutely crazy. And I think the same is true with a guy like Mike Evans. If you're looking at someone like that, him going up against Michael Ojemudia on the Broncos is probably not going to end well because, I mean, you saw what Chase Claypool did to him last week on like one catch that he had. That's all he really needed. I think Mike Evans could have like an absolutely blow up game as well. I think if you're looking for some upside at receiver in your lineup, stacking Amari Cooper and Mike Evans could pay off huge if they both hit, which I think is possible. And you saw last week with Brady and Evans finally getting on the same track.
Yeah, I like that call a lot. What are your values on FanDuel for wide receiver?
Yeah, like this tier, I'm not really a huge fan of. I like these first two guys, Darius Slayton at 5,500 and Corey Davis at 5,300. I really like, but I mean Russell Gage at 5,600 and CeeDee Lamb at 5,600 are my next two guys. I think there's solid spend downs at receiver, and I do love Slayton this week going up against a week 49ers secondary, as I mentioned, and a dampened pass rush with the loss of Nick Bosa and Solomon Thomas, and D Ford's out for this game as well. The issue for the Giants offense last week was the fact that the Bears pressure was just overwhelming. And I think that's not going to be an issue this week against the 49ers. So hopefully Daniel Jones is able to get because Slayton's a downfield guy. He doesn't get targets close to the line of scrimmage. So I think usually you could predict the Slayton weeks. I think Gage is going to be solid in general. I think with or without Julio, which I think it looks like it's trending towards Julio not playing. They said he's like a true game time decision. And I think Gage will be solid in that from that perspective. And then Lamb against, I believe they have a safety playing the nickel for Seattle. And I don't think that's going to end well with CeeDee Lamb playing the slot primarily. So I think he's a smash play in a high scoring game as well. And then this is my favorite play of this range. And he's the only one I actually have in a lineup. And that's Corey Davis going up against a secondary that was already brutal without Mike Hughes and Cam Dantzler. So Jeff Gladney and I mean, Holton Hill, I guess. Like, I don't even know who's starting for the Vikings this week, but all I know is that Corey Davis is probably going to get a lot of targets.
Yeah, I like those calls a lot. I really like the CD call. He's someone I've also been looking at, just kind of in the 5K tier on DraftKings. My guy is actually someone you mentioned earlier as someone you might be potentially off, but at 5,400, I think Deontay Johnson is a great play on DraftKings. 10 and 13 targets the last 2 weeks. They kind of speak for themselves. And on a website like DraftKings, where if you catch balls at 5,400, it doesn't really take much. If he scores a touchdown, you're cruising towards victory. And just the value on DraftKings in general is just not that great at wide receiver. So I like a guy like Deontay Johnson in cash. In GPPs, I was actually looking at Christian Kirk, but I got the alert while we've been talking that he's not going to play this Sunday, which is unfortunate. But he was 4,500. I really like the idea of playing him and pairing him off of Nuke. But anyways, no point in wasting my words. Deontay Johnson is my good value play for cash games this week on DraftKings.
Yeah, I think the Roby matchup is the only reason I'm not looking towards him. And it's not that Roby's like this shutdown guy that I'm totally scared of. I just think it's going to be a juju week because you saw like Roby played well against Hollywood Brown and Tyreek Hill in the first 2 weeks, and you saw the offenses kind of gravitate towards the other options in their passing games. On to the tight end position. For the top, I wrote no one because it looks like George Kittle's going to be out for this game. I think he's officially been ruled out. And then the other two like really top end options play on Monday night. So Andrews and Kelsey are both off the slate and Kittle is out. So I don't really want to play anyone in this kind of range. I think the top end guys that intrigues me the most is Ertz, I guess, at 6,200 on FanDuel. But I mean, 6,200 to me is like more mid-range. And I don't really I'm not really considering him, to be honest. And I think you mentioned Darren Waller. Darren Waller is like the only guy on the slate right now that is currently like a top tier tight end in terms of like talent, target share and all that stuff. But I saw some rumblings that they might use Stephon Gilmore on him. And that scares the crap out of me because I don't want anything to do with, and Bill Belichick has been known to take away your best option. And it's clear as day that the offense runs through 28 on the ground and 83 on the passing game. So I think they're going to do the best that they can to take away Waller.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I don't really play top tier tight ends on DraftKings anyways, but Darren Waller's only 5,700, which really isn't that bad. So I'm definitely going to have a tournament lineup this week with Derek Carr or Darren Waller type of stack and running it back with, one of the New England pass catchers, which kind of sucks because it's just hard to run it back with New England guys. But yeah, I'll figure it out. Realistically, though, that's not where I'm going to go. But yeah, I just figured I'd mention Darren Waller for sure is the top option to me on this slate.
Yeah. And then the mid option, Jonnu Smith, until he's priced like a top option, I'm going to keep playing him at 5,600. And I actually that might sound crazy to some of you maybe new to this channel, but I think Jonnu Smith is going to be a top tier tight end this year, like the whole year. 5,600 currently on FanDuel, and Evan Ingram at 5,900 I also like as well. Jonnu Smith, as long as A.J. Brown is out, is going to continue to be a high-level tight end play. And I think while A.J. Brown's out, he's going to establish himself as a top-tier option in this passing game. Ownership isn't supposed to be overly high according to PFF on Jonnu Smith, which kind of shocks me. In terms of Evan Ingram, I think Evan Ingram is just a great tournament play in general. And I think in a stack, which I'll get to later, I think the Giants could score a sneaky high amount of points in this game against the decimated Niners defense, as I mentioned already.
Yeah, I like those calls. Jonnu Smith's just an awesome talent. So is Evan Ingram. The mid-tier on DraftKings that I'm looking at is Hayden Hurst at 4,700. In general, I mean, if Julio doesn't play, it's great for his target shares. But last week he saw 8 targets. And I look at Austin Hooper last year where he was just super consistent, didn't need a touchdown to pay off. Hayden Hurst is just kind of like one of those guys that if I land on him, I don't know if I'm super excited. But in a GPP, if he did score a touchdown or two, it would be a massive week because I think he'll get the targets to kind of pay off in general. So that's kind of who I'm looking at the mid-tier on DraftKings.
Yeah, I definitely like that call. He's kind of like a sell high candidate for me in redraft, but I think this week he'll be pretty solid in what I expect to be a pretty high scoring game as well because Falcons. I had value of the tight ends. I think this is these two guys, especially in redraft leagues, I've been picking up a lot, and that's Jordan Akins at 5,000 and Drew Sample at 4,800. I think the reason I like these guys and then these are strictly tournament plays. I wouldn't be playing any of these guys in cash, but Akins has played 97 offensive snaps, which equates to over 80% in each of the first 2 games so far this season, which kind of surprises me because him and Darren Fells last year were completely like splitting the snaps and like one guy would get a touchdown this week, the other guy would get a touchdown the next week. Like this year, it looks like it's Akins' job, even though that Fells got the touchdown this past week. Akins had 7 targets, so I think he's going to be a solid option this week. And then in terms of Drew Sample, it looked like he kind of stepped into the role that CJ Uzama was kind of carving out for himself in this Bengals passing game as Burrow's kind of guy over the middle. So I think both of those guys present like pretty solid floors as well as some ceiling for GPP especially.
Yeah, I like those calls. On DraftKings, this value tight end is actually going to be my cash tight end. It's locked and loaded. This is like a for sure lock in my cash lineup. It's going to be Logan Thomas at 3,700. He's seen 8 and 9 targets the last 2 weeks, and he's caught like less than half, and they're not all on him. It's kind of like just a Dwayne Haskins things and him trying to get on the same page. 8 and 9 targets back-to-back weeks at 3,700, playing against the Cleveland Browns, who just are perpetually terrible against the tight end. I love Logan Thomas this week. He is a smash play in cash games.
Yeah, for what it's worth, he is actually projected to be the highest owned tight end on FanDuel because he's 4,900 on FanDuel, which is pretty. That's kind of why I stayed away
That's a
from
great
it.
price.
I think I don't really see too much difference between him and guys like Jonnu Smith and Evan Ingram, so I'd rather just pay a little bit extra for guys like that, especially when Thomas is supposed to be so highly owned. But I definitely don't mind that call. 8 and 9 targets is like pretty elite volume, to be honest, for a tight end, because tight ends generally only get like 5 or 6 targets a game.
DraftKings and FanDuel are just very different too when it comes to the one-off positions. Like on FanDuel, you can kind of afford to pay that extra $1,000 to get up to like one of the better tight ends like Jonnu. But on DraftKings, like you just can't really build. You need to save money somewhere, and tight end is almost always the best place because they have such a huge disparity, like from the prices. Like 3,700 is just really cheap for a guy like Logan Thomas.
That's dirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in general too, it seems like tight end is deeper this year. Is it just me, or does it seem like because maybe that I'll probably regret this statement, and by week 8, everyone will be injured, and we'll just be like, oh yeah, should we start like, I don't know, freaking Robert Tonyan this week? Like we're probably going to get to that point at some point this year, but I think tight end seems deeper, at least for now, with a lot of these younger guys like Fant and Hawkinson and Jonnu and all these guys kind of emerging and establishing themselves as like back end tight end one options.
Yeah, totally.
So into the game of the week, I'll let you go first because yours is the kind of the obvious pick, but I think it needed to be said because it is definitely the game of the week for DFS.
Yeah, exactly. We've talked about it a lot. It's Cowboys Seahawks. It's a total of 56.5 is massive. Both the quarterbacks are good. All the offenses are smash plays. Like the wide receivers on both teams are great. The running backs on the Cowboys, great. Zeke Elliott, really the quarterback smash. This is just a game that's going to be super fun to watch. For the Cowboys, this is a must win. The Seahawks are rolling. This is super exciting. It's great for fantasy, everything about it. It's super obvious, but just someone had to talk about it, so I did.
Yeah, for sure. I think you pretty much are rolling like 5 to 7 pass catchers total in this game, and you're going to be fine in your DFS lineups. Like it's just going to be a shootout. My game of the week is more so, I guess, maybe a tournament play, but just I actually had a hard time deciding which one was going to be my game of the week after the obvious one that you picked. I think there was like 3 like second tier ones that I really liked, and I actually decided to go with Bengals and Eagles. One of the higher paced games of the slate, according to PFFC and R. It's my lock of the week on Murder Your Bookie, which is on Notorious Fantasy's channel, should be live right now if you guys want to go check that out. Was the over in this game because I think what the opposing team does well, neither team can stop. So Miles Sanders is probably, like I expect, I think he's just going to have an awesome game. I think Cincinnati's run and pass defense is just absolutely garbage, and the Eagles are going to be able to take advantage of that as well, along with the other, the opposite side of the spectrum with Burrow and the Bengals passing game. I like a lot of the pieces in this game at their prices, namely Sanders, Burrow, Boyd, Sample, D-Jax, and Wentz. And the other games I was caught in between, I really like the Detroit-Arizona game as well as the Washington versus Cleveland game as well, just because I think there's a lot of value to be had in those games.
Yeah, you nailed it with the other 2 games. Detroit-Arizona was kind of like my runner-up. I like the call with the Philadelphia game. Miles Sanders is a smash. Going into kind of that Arizona-Detroit game, my stack of the week is Kyler to Nuke. It's obvious they've got the higher projected ownership at both the quarterback and the wide receiver positions on Roto-Grinders. But I think it's just a great stack if you can make it work. I don't know if I'm going to have a ton of it, but if you can make the stack work, I think it is the best stack.
Yeah, no doubt there. I think I've already teased it a lot, but Big Ben and Juju is my stack of the week. I think for cash and GPP, I think the cash game stacks are pretty chalky that you can think of off the top of your head, like Kyler and Hopkins and Russ and one of his receivers or Dak and one of his receivers. But I really do like this stack of Big Ben and Juju because I don't think a lot of people are going to have it. And I also think the Brady and one or both of Evans and Godwin is also a good stack, or the triple Titan stack as well with Jonnu, Tannehill, and Corey Davis. As I mentioned with Juju, I wouldn't worry about him because apparently he is going to play according to himself personally. And as I mentioned with Roby's the only corner worth a damn on that team, and I think Juju's going to eat up the inside slot on Houston.
Yeah, I like those calls. Going into now the lock of the week, which week 1, I missed week 2, obviously, because I wasn't here. But week 1, my lock was Devontae Adams. We saw how that turned out. So, I mean, let's just pat myself on the back a little bit. Week 3, my lock is going to be Miles Sanders, the most obvious choice of all time. 6,400 on DraftKings, median projection of 21 points, which is it's 3.5x. Which is insane for a median projection. 7 targets, 4 red zone attempts last week. Easy money. Don't overthink this. Just play Miles Sanders. It's a smash play.
I didn't actually realize you had Miles Sanders. I have Miles Sanders. So I'm going to pivot.
Well, there we go.
I'm going to pivot on mine and say my lock of the week is Kenyon Drake for all the reasons we've mentioned thus far.
Good choice.
I think the Lions defense is clearly a run funnel without Snacks Harrison. And Kenyon Drake is due for this big game. And if you're listening to this and you're in a redraft league and the Kenyon Drake owner is panicking, I would go get him before this game because it's going to cost you a lot more after this game. As far as my locks thus far, I think I'm 1 for 1. I'm 0 for 2, man. My lock of the week in week 1 was Marvin Jones and he had a dud. And then my lock of the week in week 2 was Ronald Jones and he had a dud. But this guy's last name isn't Jones, so I'll be good.
There you go. Bounce back, baby.
Yeah. All right. So if you guys enjoyed that, as I mentioned, hit the like button. If you enjoyed the appearance of Nick's son, you can also hit the like button. Yep. Leave some comments down below if you got to this point in the video. We're working with what we got here. So subscribe to the channel if you're new, as I mentioned. Hit the icon so you're notified when we go live and then when we post videos. You want to say something before you get out of here?
Just appreciate the time. Hopefully you guys win some money. Hopefully I win some money. Definitely hope you watch all the way through because we dropped some huge knowledge. And bye from me and my 3-year-old who's decided to be a huge interruption this week.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I got a lot of editing work to do, but it'll be okay. So take it easy, guys. Peace out and enjoy your Sunday for football.